little rainy days project is a really lovely beginner's project. It's relatively quick to make and it covers a few of the basic weaving techniques to get you into the swing of things. They're really easy to make your own by changing the size and the colours, and they also make fabulous little gifts for people. To complete this project, you'll need a frame loom. These come in all shapes and sizes, but they all essentially do the same job. In this video, we'll be using this small adjustable frame loom with notches, but if you have a loom with a rotating heddle bar, please refer to the PDFs for instructions on how to use it. A shuttle, a tapestry needle, a fork, a piece of card at least 5 centimetres or 2 inches deep and wider than your piece is going to be. Think old cereal box. A pair of scissors, and something to hang your piece from. This is an old matchstick with the striking head removed. The materials you'll need are warp yarn. I'd suggest using a cabled cotton or linen warp yarn. However, any strong, fine-ish yarn with not too much flex will work. Weft yarn for the rain. 3 different colours is enough, though you can absolutely use more. These are naturally dyed linens that are used in this video. However, you could use a wide range of yarns for the rain, from recycled cotton to your leftover stash. Fibre for the cloud. In this video I'm using a blend of plant fibres, though there are plenty of other suitable fibres to choose from, including flax, viscose and banana, just to name a few. You can scale this project up or down by simply adding or subtracting to the number of warp ends. Just bear in mind that the bigger you go, the more materials you'll need. In this video I'm using 3 colours of the same yarn, however you can choose to add as many rows of rya in as many colours as you like, as demonstrated here. If you're using thicker yarns for the rya knots, you may only want to use 1 strand per rya knot to prevent your warp from bulging out. Start by taking your warp yarn and placing it in a basket or bowl. Holding on to the tail, then place the basket or bowl down next to your chair, and that just stops it from rolling around in between chair legs. Now we're going to double warp the loom with 26 warp ends. So in the case of this loom, that involves starting on 8 pegs in. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we're going to take the tail of the warp yarn and wrap that twice around that 8th peg in from the side and tie it in a nice secure double knot. And now you're going to lead your warp yarn up and round the 8th peg in from the top, or whichever amount of pegs you need to start in to get your 26 warp ends and to have a nice central warp. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, come up round the top, and then because we're double warping, you're sharing a notch. So you're aiming for 2 warp ends in between each notch. So as you come back up to the top, you're sharing the notch up at the top, and then just keep going until you've got your 26 warp ends. So now I've got 8 in from the other side. I'm going to wrap that twice around again, that last warp peg, and just cut myself enough of a tail so I can comfortably tie it back onto that last warp end and slide the knot down as far down towards the bottom pegs as you can, and then you can just tidy those tails up a little bit. You're now ready to add in your cardboard base, and so you just need to weave that over and under every warp end all the way over to the other side, and then slide it down to the bottom, just checking you've gone over and under every single warp end. So now referring to your weave plan and taking the natural linen, which is the same as your warp yarn, measure out enough length for 2 rows of twining. So that's going to be around about 6 times the width of your warp. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then fold that over and go ahead and pop in 2 picks of twining. With your 2 picks of twining in, draw them down to sit on your cardboard base. Now, if you've got this as a kit with the yarns that come with it, you'll have 3 shades of indigo dyed linen. And we're going to start off with indigo 1, which is the darkest shade of indigo. You now need to measure 52 lengths of 40 centimetres. So that's 30, 40, and go ahead and double those over until you've got 52 lengths before cutting the loops at the top and the bottom to make your raya. Now taking your big bundle of cut raya, you're going to use 4 threads per bundle. Now, if you slightly over measured your length and you've run out of yarn, just make the occasional bundle with 3 in instead of 4, and that'll get you all the way over. So double over your bundle in an arch shape, lie it over your first 2 warp ends, and one side at a time come round the back and up through the middle, round the back and up through the middle, giving it a little tug up before sliding it down into position. Now you can cut your raya as you go. I like leaving mine all shaggy and then I give it a final haircut at the end, but you do whatever feels right to you. Now taking your natural linen again, measure out about 8 generous widths of your warp and put 2 picks of plain weave in to trap your raya knots in place. You can now leave this linen attached and uncut as we're going to use it again to sandwich in the next row of raya. Now taking the mid blue, measure out 44 lengths of 40 centimetres. Now taking your bundle of raya and using 4 ends, 4 threads per bundle, go ahead and on alternate warp ends to the ones that you've used below, go ahead and pop in a whole row of raya. Now with this second row of raya, I'm going to trim them as I go, just so that you get a bit of grading up and you can see a difference in the colour there. But I'm going to cut them quite unevenly. So that you get a more natural feel. Now taking your linen that's still attached, go ahead and weave a couple of picks of plain weave. Leaving your yarn attached still and taking indigo 3, which is the palest shade of indigo you'll have, measure out 52 lengths of 20 centimetres. Now taking 4 threads per bundle, work a row of Raya, remembering to use the alternate warp ends to that which you've used below. Now I've got this Raya in, I'm just going to go ahead and give it an uneven haircut, just to make it a little more natural. You can also do this off the loom, it's really up to you. But I like a bit more of a jagged finish. Now weave 2 more picks of plain weave. We're now going to cut the tail and just tidy that away. Pull that down and just leave the tail hanging out at the back. Now, taking your plant roving, you're going to tease a strip off. It might be that it's in quite a slim bundle already and you don't need to tease much off, but we're going to just tease a little bit off here to demonstrate. And then with the wispy end, just weave that, give it a little twist, weave it over and under a few picks, just to tidy the tail away and to trap that in place. Now I've got quite a long strip here of the roving, so I'm just going to twist it round my hand to make it slightly more manageable and give it a little twist to firm it up a little bit. It just makes it a little bit stronger. And do single sumac over an entire row, over around about every 4th warp end. Just tuck that under and bring that back up to the surface. And then every time you've done 1 stitch of sumac, take your roving and tie a knot in it. And this is where giving it a twist comes in quite helpful as well. It keeps it nice and together. And just snug that knot down as close to the warp as you can get it. And so work your way over the entire row, one stitch of sumac and tie a knot, 1 stitch of sumac and tie a knot. Now, after every row of sumac with the plant roving, you're going to add in a couple of picks of plain weave with the natural linen, cutting it at the end and tidying the tails away. Now you're going to work another row of sumac, but start 2 to 3 warp ends in from the side, as you want the edges of your cloud to taper off up towards the top. And we're going to continue doing that, weaving your rows of sumac, tapering in at the edges and sandwiching each row of sumac in between a couple of picks of plain weave until we've finished our little cloud shape. If you run out of your rovings, simply reattach a new piece. Now finally, taking some more natural linen, and how big your cloud is will really depend on how much linen you'll need, but better to do a bit more than to run out. And add in a row of twining all the way around the outside of your cloud, nice and firm, and bring it down nice and tight in towards the cloud to trap it all in place, and then tidy the tails away. Once you've got your 2 rows of twining in, it's time to remove the whole piece from the loom. So start by taking your cardboard base out, and how easy this is will depend on how tightly you've packed your weaving down on top of it. Sometimes you do end up having to cut the cardboard, but this one's coming out nice and easily. As we're going to be tidying all of the warp ends away to make a nice clean edge around the piece, it doesn't really matter whether you start by cutting off the top warp ends or whether you start at the bottom. If you're starting at the bottom, just flip up all the raya knots up over the top. Your first 2 will be a bit of a wiggle. You've got your 2 start and end warp ends there, and you can just trim them, the knots, off as you go. And then the rest of them, just tease them off or cut them, because they're going to have to get cut eventually anyway. So we'll get these ones up. That last one's a bit of a wiggle. And then the top ones will just come off nice and easily then. And these top ones are going to get stitched individually down into the back of the piece, so we can go ahead and just cut them into a slightly more manageable length now. And so now it's completely free from the loom. We can flip it over here, and you can see here that you've got your plain weave picks trapping all of your sumac in place there. And we're going to use some of those to tidy these tails away down through into the back of the piece, and that will just make the back of your piece more sturdy as well. It'll add to the structure, and we can tidy down, trim down some of these chunkier tails of sumac. But I'm going to start by just securing this bottom edge, because it's nice and easy, and these knots don't have to be really neat because they're concealed by the raya fringe that will hang in front of them. Where you've got your random end there, you can just add that in to make it a bunch of 3 and tie it to the pair next door. And we'll just bring that round, and we'll go ahead and do that all the way over, just tying them in a double knot, nice and secure so it doesn't come undone. And then when you're happy with that, you can just give it a little trim, and we'll do that all the way over. Next thing I'm going to do is just tidy away these tails, because it'll make it easier then when you're tidying away the top warp ends, if you can see where you're threading them without all these loose bits in the way. So now you've tidied all your tails away, all that's left to do is to stitch these warp ends down into the back of your piece, and that will also sturdy it up a little bit, make it a little bit stronger. But this is a super lightweight piece. The sumac's really lightweight, so it doesn't need to be massively strong, and it's a wall hanging, so it's not going to get used massively. It'll just be sitting on a wall. So starting from one side or the other, come down through the warp end next door, and then just find a few picks for that needle to wiggle through. Post that warp end through and pull it down,
And you can either trim as you go, or you can leave the trimming to the end, and go ahead and do that all the way over to make a nice clean edge. Now we've tidied all of those warp ends away, we're just going to add a concealed header in. Now I'm going to use this tiny little bit of stick I've got here. It doesn't need to be any more than that because it's so small and lightweight. And we're going to attach the stick onto the back of the hanging with just 2 pieces of the linen warp or whatever scrap yarn you've got lying around, even normal cotton would do. So we'll take our first piece of linen, thread it through the tapestry needle, and we'll just bring it up. So I think we'll sit it, it's only so many places it can go, but we'll pop it about there, and we'll just bring this linen yarn up and through. And then we'll just sit the stick over the top, and we'll just bring that round and just stitch it round just a couple of times to secure it in place. 1 and 2. And just for the sake of speeding things up, I'll just do it twice with this one. And then just go ahead and tie that in a nice secure double knot before trimming the ends down. If you wanted a slightly neater finish, I'm being a bit lazy here, you could stitch the tails back down into the hanging, but it's not the prettiest back of a piece because the sumac means the warp ends are a bit all over the place. So I think that's fine like that. So you can now flip it over, give it a little shake to get those raya knots all shaggy and wild. And now would be the time to just give it one final haircut if you want to make them even more irregular. You might want to do them absolutely completely straight, that would look amazing as well, but just give them one last little haircut and you're then ready to go and pop it on a wall. This is also a really lovely project to scale up because it's so simple. It's nice and quick to produce something quite a lot bigger. So it's completely up to you what size you do it. I quite like these little ones. They make really lovely gifts for people. And yeah, I hope you enjoy making them as much as I have.